All right, so praise, I would ask that for this during the middle of some of your answers and when you feel like you need to do the thing you need to help keep your thing straight on the response.
Yeah.
So my first question would be the issue of the word duname. So you said that the word duname means aptitude, correct?
Yes.
Could you define what aptitude is?
You're asking what is aptitude?
Yes, I'm asking you, could you define aptitude for the audience?
Okay, that would be
Your mic cut out.
Praise, your mic's still out.
Wow. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. It means a base of knowledge or understanding.
Okay. And that's all it means?
Now we can't hear you.
Okay, so is that all that it means?
No, but I think in the context of the verse, like I showed, it does fit that criteria.
Okay, but you are aware that there is, especially as defined by Merriam-Webster and Oxford, that it says to the issue of an ability or a capacity or a general suitability, correct? As well.
Sure, yeah.
So how would it, based off of text, then how would you get the one that you?
Praise, your mic might not be on if you're trying to respond.
Here we go. Well, as I explained, though, that I used, no man can, or the Father, okay, in John, let's see here, that they shall learn from the Father, as John 6:45. So learn means aptitude there. I mean, that's how I correlated it.
Okay, then. So concerning the definition by the not Matthew, but Vine's complete expository dictionary of Old and New Testament words, he defines it as to be able, have power, whether by personal ability, permission, or opportunity, is sometimes rendered may or might, as is seen in Matthew 26:9, Mark 14:5, Acts 17:19, and 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 6. So here we definitely see that the common theme by this scholar is that it means to be able and to have power, whether it be by a personal ability, a permission, or an opportunity. Would you accept this definition by Dr. Vines?
Praise, you might have to do the mic thing again, just in case.
Sure, I would accept that, but I think there is one that trumps that, like I mentioned, es hus in 1 Peter 4:11 is actually a more valid translation. Translation.
Okay. How would you interpret Romans chapter 3, verse 11?
I have to read it. Hold on.
The one that says that there is none that understandeth, and there is none that seek after God.
That's obviously not a universal generalization because not all people are not understanding. I mean, I know in Muslims that know about the Bible. I know in other religions. So I think it's a regular, not a universal generalization. It's just a, like I said before, reproach to those people under the law.
Okay. So then when he goes over to verse 9, which is before Paul starts citing the Old Testament, and he says, "What then, are we better than they? No, in no wise, for we have before proved, both Jews and Gentiles, that they are all under sin." And both Jews and Gentiles, in referring to the categories, that's then when he says all of these people are under sin, that's when he goes into citing the passages. So would you say that these Jews and Gentiles that he cites here referred to a specific kind of Jew or Gentile? Mike's muted.
Wow, this is tedious, but yeah, I don't see the word "all" there at all. And how could you say that's universal anyway?
Well, it does say all because it says that they are all under sin. I'm reading this in my.
Well, yeah, I don't deny that, but I'm saying how do you exegete that as all don't have understanding or come to God? Doesn't mean, I mean, all under sin. That's a non sequitur.
Because he cites this in reference to those people, because he says, "As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one." And obviously, this is referring to Jewish scriptures, but Paul is making the application in reference to these people that he cites, which he says, "Are we better than they? No, in no wise, for we have before proved, both Jews and Gentiles, that they are all under sin." So,
and that's the law.
With that in mind, so are these Jews and Gentiles of a specific kind of Jews and Gentiles, or
they are anyone that's under the law?
Okay, and there are certain people that weren't under the law.
No, everyone is under the law because God's his moral decree. I mean, his moral his moral standard is universal. It's not in a particular
law.
Yes.
11's referring to people who are under the law.
Yes.
Okay, so continuing on with the questions, did you say that the Jews at the time of Jesus and the apostles from the different periods worshipped God even before the conversion to being Christians?
That's correct. Lydia, yes.
So before they became Christians, the church, they were already worshiping God.
Yes, the pre-Christian Jews, yes.
Yes, okay. If that's referring to Lydia in this case, then wouldn't that be what's happening here, in which it is now referring to the worship of God in the fullness and the trueness of the light from what would be considered a Unitarian or a different perspective of it, versus now it's Jesus is being seen as God, and then the Holy Spirit moves in for the triune gospel that is preached, that she now converts to the triune nature of God.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, that it's just aptitude. She didn't have the aptitude to know about Christ because she probably just learned about Christ, his first advent. He learned of the first advent, the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, and then she converted because she connected the dots.
Okay. So, saved before that, or if she was saved before that, then why then would, according to Acts chapter 16, verse 15, then immediately the next verse after she has attended unto the things which were spoken to Paul, that it says, "And when she was baptized, and her household, she besought us, saying, If ye have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come into my house and abide there. And she constrained us." When baptism was definitely seen as a sign of someone that converted and was saved through the gospel, as was seen parallel in Acts chapter 8 with the Ethiopian eunuch.
This comes down to the doctrines of salvation. The thief on the cross, he did not get baptized, and he was saved. So baptism is not necessary for salvation. Even though it might be a sign, I mean, you could possibly say you can go that way, but it's still, you would have to, it's supposition, though.
I'm not saying that baptism was required for salvation, but it was a sign of the salvation, as is linked to...
Yeah, it could be a sign, yeah.
Definitely, in light of the fact that this story parallels very closely with what we see in the same book, book where it talks about in Acts 8, the same kind of thing, where Ethiopian eunuch hears these things. Obviously, of course, there wasn't an opportunity for the thief on the cross,
5
but
minute
we still
warning,
saw one of the
fellas.
signs. Okay. So we saw one sign at least. And that was through the fact that the thief on the cross had said and put his faith. But we then have another thing concerning the issue of baptism, which was as seen in Matthew chapter 28, that you have to go out and baptize all people in the name of Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, which shows that that was also connected to the evangelism call that they had. So, sufficient there. So, you mentioned...
It does not say that she was saved, though. That is supposition. That is eisegesis into the text. You cannot impose your own context into the text. But I mean, I'm sure you.
Right,
I mean, I'll even concede.
That's not what I'm doing. But anyways, we're going to continue on with the question. You mentioned Ezekiel chapter 18, that it's some about turn from righteousness. What passage are you referring to specifically within Ezekiel chapter 18?
Verses 24 and 26.
Verses 24 to what? 26?
Yeah.
When the righteous turn away from his righteousness and committeth iniquity, and doeth according to all the abominations that wicked men doth, shall he live. All his righteousness that he hath done shall not be mentioned in his trespasses, that he hath trespassed in his sin, and hath sinned. Yet ye say, the way of the Lord is not equal. Hear now, O house of Israel, is not my way equal? Are not your ways equal? When a righteous man turn away from his righteousness and committeth iniquity, and dieth in them, for his iniquity that he hath done, shall he die. So where does it say or indicate that the aspect is that he's the grace of God, or that he's lost salvation? Like, which of this was supposed to refute the I or the P?
Mike, phrase.
This would be the P of TULIP.
Okay, I figured as much. And I would assume that the verse 26 is where you would get it?
Yeah, both 24 and 26.
Okay, so is in the Old Testament, correct?
Yeah.
And that there is no idea of them going into a heaven. They both, the people of wicked and righteous, would have been going to Sheol.
No, I mean, because Abraham says, I want to go to my people where my child is in heaven. Abraham wouldn't be going to Sheol. In fact, Luke 16 says Abraham's at the right side of the gulf, the bosom, the rich man went into the bosom, Lazarus went to the bosom of Abraham because he's already in heaven.
Oh, actually, that's one of the compartments of Sheol, where that is indeed where Abraham resides. And in fact, the Jews referred to that particular component in history as being the bosom of Abraham, hence why that story was then utilized, Jesus in the parable. But going up, anyways, from that, either way, it doesn't say anywhere that they lost salvation, but rather they had committed iniquity and that dieth in them. It doesn't say anywhere that there's some sort of unbelief. And even still says, when a righteous man turn away from righteousness and committeth iniquity, he's still righteous. It's just that, like I mentioned before, there's always going to be downslopes where people struggle. So do you think that a person that is righteous or born again, that if he sins, that it kind of forfeits his salvation?
Absolutely. If you don't repent, absolutely.
Even though that First John would refute that.
Well, actually, if you go to verse 4 in this chapter, it says, the one who sins, all souls are mine, and the soul that sinneth, it shall die. Now, is that just talking about Sheol? I mean, to me, that's obviously an indication of hell.
You'll be able to ask me that question when it's your
okay.
the Q&A. But I would at least point out that for that, if that's the case, then you should also agree with what Romans 3:23 and 6:23 say, that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. A sin is death, so we're all then guilty of this at that point.
All right, then that's time.